Hey guys, tonight we begin not with fairy tales, but with the cold stone reality of a medieval castle. It's the Middle Ages, a world of towering walls, flickering torches, and endless drafts that creep through every crack no matter how many furs you pile on. You think it's romantic, but trust me, one night in here, and you'd be begging for your own bed back home. The world is darker, smokier, filthier. The floors are covered in rushes that haven't been changed in months. The food tastes like it's been boiled into despair, and the toilets. Well, let's just say you don't want to be standing under the wrong window at the wrong time. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, steady hum. Close your eyes and imagine the heavy clang of iron doors, the echo of boots on stone, and the faint smell of smoke and rot that never quite leaves these walls. Congratulations! You've just stepped into a medieval castle, and the night has only just begun to test you. You arrive in the medieval castle at the worst possible moment, dusk. Not the cozy kind of dusk where birds chirp and warm light spills from cottage windows, but the kind of dusk where shadows lengthen like gossip in a small village, and every creak in the stone corridors sounds like someone sharpening a knife in the dark. The air is damp, the stones colder than your best intentions, and you're already wondering if you should have just stayed in your imaginary time machine. After all, medieval castles look majestic from the outside, but stepping in feels less like walking into a fairy tale and more like being slowly swallowed by a damp cave that has questionable housekeeping. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Castles, despite what Disney might have led you to believe, did not come with pine, scented halls or lavender sachets in the windows. Instead, you're met with a bouquet of wet dog, old owl, wood smoke, and just a hint of something you really hope isn't decomposing rat. The Great Hall is the grand centerpiece, but grandeur here is defined less by glittering chandeliers, and more by giant wooden beams, smoke-blackened ceilings, and a floor covered with straw meant to soak up everything you don't want to think about. And by everything, I do mean everything. Let's just say medieval people didn't invent indoor plumbing, but they invented very creative ways of ignoring that fact. You hear voices echoing from the far end of the hall, guards chatting in a dialect so thick it might as well be its own medieval dialectic soup. They laugh, the kind of laugh men do when they're only 2 cups of ale away from challenging someone to a brawl, and you instinctively try not to make eye contact. This is good survival instinct, but it also makes you look suspicious, which, ironically, in a medieval castle is worse than looking friendly. Here, not being seen at all might be your best bet, which is hard to do when the rushes crunch loudly beneath your feet with every step. The straw floor wasn't made for stealth, it was made for catching food scraps, spills, and, on unfortunate days, blood. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Surely you could just cozy up by the fire, maybe find a nice spot near the hearth and warm yourself. Oh, sweet summer child. The hearth is already crowded, and not by smiling peasants singing madrigals. No, it's crowded with guards, dogs, and 1 or 2 chickens that strut around like they own the place. And if you thought medieval dogs were friendly, let me assure you they were not the pampered labradoodles you see today, with bows in their fur and Instagram pages. These dogs were scrappy, underfed, and very serious about guarding scraps of meat. One wrong glance at someone's dinner bone, and suddenly you're part of a growling contest you did not sign up for. You tug your cloak tighter around yourself, though of course it's not your cloak at all. It's some ill-fitting wool thing that scratches worse than a 7th century lice infestation. Which, incidentally, is exactly what you're trying not to think about right now. Wool here isn't the cozy merino blend you get online with free shipping. It's itchy, coarse, and smells faintly like the sheep who wore it first. Which, to be fair, might actually be better company than some of the humans you'll meet tonight. Now pause for a moment. Imagine this exact situation in today's world. You walk into someone's house for the first time, and within 10 minutes you're already competing with half-starved dogs for fire space while standing on what amounts to a communal compost bin. Would you stay? Probably not. You'd politely make an excuse about needing to get something from your car and never return. But in the castle, leaving isn't an option. At least, not without freezing to death outside or being mistaken for a spy. So congratulations, you're stuck. As you stand there trying to blend in with the smoky gloom, a serving boy rushes past you with a tray, nearly sloshing thinol onto your feet. He mutters something in a dialect so rapid and foreign it might as well be encrypted, then disappears into the shadows. People around you eat with their hands, gnawing on bones and tossing them straight onto the straw floor. You watch one man toss the remains of a chicken leg, only for a dog to snatch it up midair, in what could only be described as medieval dinner theatre. It would be funny if it weren't so alarming to realize. That's also how your fingers might look if you get too close to either man or beast. You think maybe you'll just slip into a corner, avoid attention, and wait for everyone to pass out from all. Smart idea, except corners aren't safe havens here. In the corner is where the draft is coldest, where rats scuttle most freely, and where shadows stretch long enough to make you imagine every creak is someone sneaking up behind you. The human brain is very talented at inventing horrors in dim light, and in a castle, the soundtrack of dripping water and shifting beams only adds to the paranoia. If you're waiting for something comfortable, a chair, a cushion, perhaps even a bed, let me ruin that hope quickly. Seating, if you're lucky, is a hard bench, polished not by design, but by generations of itchy medieval bottoms. And the bed, don't get ahead of yourself. Tonight you'll be lucky to find a wooden cot with a straw mattress. And by straw mattress, I mean literally a sack of straw. And by lucky, I mean you'll probably be sharing it with fleas. Imagine you're scrolling through Airbnb, and the description reads, charming medieval castle, authentic ambience, rustic straw bedding, shared lice colony included, strong chance of sudden fire. Would you book it? No. And yet here you are, living the worst rental experience in history. The torches sputter as the great hall grows darker, and you realize something unsettling. Medieval lighting was not designed for comfort. A torch here, a candle there, and suddenly you understand why everyone in old portraits looks like they're squinting. It isn't because the artist was bad at eyes, it's because nobody could see a thing after sundown. The hall is filled with shadows that don't stay still. Every flicker of flame makes the carved beams above twist into monstrous shapes, like the ceiling itself is alive and mocking you. The fire in the hearth is supposed to warm the hall, but instead it smokes so heavily you can taste it in your throat. The air is thick, heavy, and clings to your lungs, as if it's insisting you join the local statistics for early death. You cough quietly, but of course that makes you noticeable. One of the guards near the hearth glances over, eyes narrowed. His beard is thick, his teeth suspiciously fewer than you'd prefer in a man carrying a sword, and he stares at you as if coughing is the most suspicious act he's seen all day. You look away quickly, pretending to be fascinated by a crack in the wall, and the wall does deserve fascination. The castle walls are damp, streaked with soot, and exude that earthy, mineral smell you usually find in basements that nobody cleans. Touch the stones and they're clammy, as though the castle itself is perpetually sweating. Which, to be fair, it might be. Castles were designed to keep enemies out, not comfort in, so insulation wasn't a priority. The cold drafts sneak in through every slit of a window, and you can't help but notice that the people who built this place seem to love making holes in walls for arrows, but not for airflow. Someone somewhere starts strumming a lute, a sound that ought to be romantic, but instead feels like a cat got hold of some strings and decided to practice. A few voices join in a drunken song, their lyrics impossible to decipher, though you catch a word or two about ale and women. The laughter grows louder, rowdier, and you begin to wonder if tonight will end in a brawl. The medieval solution to boredom often seemed to be, fight about it, and the last thing you want is to be mistaken for a willing participant. It's in moments like this you realize the castle isn't a home, it's a machine of survival. Everything here screams of function over comfort. The hall, grand as it seems, is also a place to intimidate visitors, to remind peasants who's in charge, to host feasts where alliances are made and broken. The warmth is a luxury, the food a display, the people a hierarchy of danger levels. And you, unfortunately, are at the very bottom, somewhere between servant and furniture. Let's pause for a little modern comparison, shall we? Imagine walking into an office holiday party where you don't know anyone. Everyone is already drinking, inside jokes are flying, and you're standing there clutching a sad cup of soda. Now remove the soda, add 3 times the smoke, a floor layered with rotting rushes, and the real possibility that if someone doesn't like your face, they might literally stab you. That's your current vibe check. You think maybe the upper floors will be better? Surely a castle bedroom must have some comfort. You decide to sneak toward the staircase, careful to look like you belong. It's not easy, considering your shoes are caked with mud, and your modern brain is screaming at you to avoid eye contact with people who solved arguments using axes. Still, you shuffle past the hall, toward the narrow spiral staircase. The stairs themselves are a hazard, uneven stone steps that twist tightly upward in a way that makes you dizzy. The walls press close, the torchlight flickers, and the smell here is even worse. It's a pungent mix of damp stone and something human that should not be this close to the stairs. Then it hits you: sanitation. Or rather, the lack of it. Medieval castles had guardrobes, charming little latrine shafts built into the walls where waste was expected to drop outside into a pit or moat. In theory, this kept things clean. In practice, it meant every draft carried up the scent of centuries of digestive history. You try not to breathe too deeply, though your eyes water as if protesting this cruel joke. Somewhere above you hear the unmistakable sound of a chamber pot being emptied, followed by a splash outside. You're grateful not to be standing beneath it. When you finally emerge into a corridor above the hall, you notice the silence. Unlike the noisy Great Hall, the corridors feel deserted, the air heavy with the sense that people are sleeping, or perhaps lurking. Tapestries hang on the walls, stiff with smoke and embroidered scenes of knights, and saints who stare down at you with eyes too serious for bedtime. You know logically they're just thread, but in the shifting light they feel alive, watching, judging. Your stomach growls, but the idea of food is unappealing. Dinner, as you glimpse downstairs, is half-cooked meat and bread tougher than your will to survive. And let's not forget the communal drinking cups. Medieval germs were shared as freely as gossip, and you'd rather risk hunger than discover the medieval cure for dysentery. And yet, hunger aside, you must think of where to sleep. If you stay in the hall, you risk drunken brawlers. If you climb higher, you risk being mistaken for a thief. Either way, your odds of comfort hover somewhere around 0. You press on, each creaking floorboard daring to expose your presence. Now imagine explaining this to someone today. Sorry I'm late. I was climbing a staircase that smelled like a toilet, dodging airborne chamber pots, and looking for a straw sack to share with rats. They'd assume you were either exaggerating or describing your college dorm. But here, it's just another Tuesday night. A sound interrupts your thoughts. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming down the corridor. You freeze, pressed against the cold stone wall. A guard rounds the corner, lantern in hand, eyes sharp and suspicious. He mutters something, then pauses, staring directly at you. The silence stretches, the flame flickers, and you realize that surviving even one night in this castle might depend on what you say or do in the next 10 seconds. And if you think this is tense, wait until you see what's waiting in the castle's so-called bedchamber. The guard's eyes linger on you a little too long, and you realize medieval small talk doesn't exist. There's no polite, "Good evening," or "Nice weather we're having." There's just suspicion. His lantern light dances across your face, making you painfully aware of every bead of sweat on your brow. For a second, you think he's going to demand who you are, drag you back to the Great Hall, and let the ale-soaked crowd decide your fate in a very democratic, but very stabby manner. But after a grunt, the medieval equivalent of, "You're not worth the effort," he trudges past you. His boots thud against the wooden floor, the sound echoing long after he disappears. You exhale slowly, realizing that survival here often depends on being too boring to notice. Congratulations, your new life goal is to be wallpaper. The corridor narrows and bends, leading you toward what you hope is a place to sleep. A small wooden door creaks open, revealing a chamber that, at first glance, looks almost inviting. There's a bed, or what passes for one. A wooden frame stuffed with straw, covered with a rough woolen blanket. You smile for a split second, until your modern brain catches up with the details. That straw isn't fresh. It's dark, flattened, and smells faintly off. Let's call it history. You don't want to think too hard about how many bodies, sweaty or sick, have laid on it before you. You gingerly press a hand against the mattress, only for something to squirm beneath the straw. You jerk back. Was it a mouse? A rat? Or just the collective movement of an entire flea colony that has claimed this bed as their ancestral homeland? Either way, you realize quickly the bed isn't yours. It belongs to them. You sit cautiously at the edge, trying to convince yourself that you can do this, that sleep will come if you just pretend hard enough. But the smell is overwhelming: old sweat, damp wool, a faint tang of smoke, and something suspiciously like mildew. You roll to your side, pulling the blanket over yourself, and instantly regret the decision. The blanket is heavier than it looks, but not in a comforting weighted blanket way. It's heavy in the sense that it feels like it hasn't been washed since William the Conqueror last took a bath. From across the chamber comes the sound of breathing. Deep, guttural, rattling snores that suggest you're not alone. In the dim light, you make out the shapes of others curled on similar straw pallets. Men, women, maybe even children, all sharing the space like livestock penned for the night. Privacy isn't a medieval invention. You're just another body in the communal heap, hoping not to be mistaken for a thief, or worse, mistaken for a free corner of mattress. And the sounds. Oh, the sounds. Snoring, coughing, the occasional groan. Somewhere, someone mutters in their sleep. Somewhere else, a child cries briefly before being hushed. The symphony of humanity is relentless, and you wonder how anyone in history managed a good night's rest. Your brain, unhelpfully, supplies a modern comparison. It's like trying to sleep on a long-haul flight. Only the airplane is a freezing stone box. The food was tossed on the floor earlier, and the guy in the row behind you has the plague. You close your eyes and try to relax, but your imagination betrays you. Every tickle on your skin feels like a flea. Every creak of the floor makes you think a guard has returned. Every cough reminds you that medieval medicine mostly involved bloodletting and prayers, neither of which are listed under effective treatments by modern science. You shiver, pull the blanket tighter, and remind yourself you only have to survive one night. Just one night. How bad could it be? As if on cue, a sudden crash jolts you upright. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slams open, voices rise in argument, and boots pound toward the chamber. The others barely stir, used to the nightly chaos. But you, new to this world, feel your heart hammering in your chest. The voices draw closer, the words sharp and angry, and you realize this isn't a random disturbance. It's a fight. And fights in castles don't usually end with a polite handshake. If you thought the fleas were your biggest problem tonight, wait until you see how medieval people handled midnight brawls. The boots thunder nearer until they crash into the chamber, and suddenly the darkness erupts into chaos. Two men tumble in, fists swinging, fueled by morale than reason. One slams against the wall, rattling the wooden frame of a bed, while the other draws a dagger with the casualness of someone reaching for a spoon. Shouts rise, bodies shift, and the once drowsy room is now fully awake. You press yourself flat against the wall, trying to become invisible. But in a castle, invisibility isn't an option. There's always someone watching. The man with the dagger swings wildly, narrowly missing the arm of another sleeper, who shrieks and scrambles to safety. The crowd erupts into panicked yelling. No guards appear, no authority intervenes. In this world, fights are resolved in real time, without referees, and certainly without HR. The clash grows louder, rougher, and for a moment you're convinced someone is about to die right at your feet. Then, just as suddenly, it ends. One man staggers back, blood trickling from his cheek, while the other, dagger in hand, spits on the floor and storms off. The room sinks back into uneasy silence. The only evidence of the violence is the metallic tang of blood mingling with the smoke, and the thin whimpering of someone whose sleep has been broken beyond repair. Your heart still pounds, your breath quick and shallow. Around you, people settle back into their straw, muttering curses as if this is normal. because for them, it is. Medieval nights were loud, violent, unpredictable, and every dawn was a small miracle. You lie back down, staring into the darkness, wondering how you'll ever close your eyes in a place where death feels as casual as dinner scraps tossed on the floor. And then come the rats. Small, quick, determined. You hear them before you see them, the faint skitter of claws across stone. One darts along the wall, its shadow enormous in the flickering torchlight. Another scurries beneath the straw bed, brushing your foot in a way that makes your entire soul try to leap out of your skin. You clamp your eyes shut, gripping the blanket as though it might shield you, but all it does is trap the itching warmth of fleas. Somewhere above, a howl of wind moans through the arrow slits, carrying with it the endless draught. You shiver, not from cold alone, but from the weight of being so thoroughly out of place. There's no comfort here, only survival, and even that feels uncertain. The night stretches long. Every sound is sharper now. The snore of a stranger, the cough of a sick child, the drip of water into a stone basin. Each one reminds you that the castle is alive, breathing with its own rhythm, utterly indifferent to your fear. You lie there, staring into the dark, waiting for sleep that will never come. And if you think this first night has been miserable, wait until you see what happens when the castle wakes at dawn. You don't sleep, not even a little. Instead, you lie on your straw pallet, staring at the shadows, listening to the symphony of snores, coughs, and the occasional sound of something, or someone, scratching in places you'd rather not imagine. Your body is stiff from the hard bedding, itchy from fleas, and tense from the memory of the midnight brawl that nearly ended with someone bleeding out in the corner. And just as your brain finally begins to wander into something resembling rest, the day begins. It doesn't begin gently, with birdsong and a soft sunrise creeping across your pillow. No, the medieval castle wakes like a war drum. Somewhere, a bell clangs, loud, insistent, reverberating through the stone corridors until it shakes your teeth. Voices rise, boots stomp, doors slam. The castle has decided it's morning, and therefore you have no choice but to agree. The first thing you notice is the smell. During the night, it was tolerable. You were too distracted by rats and paranoia to pay attention. But in the morning, when everything stirs, the odors intensify. The straw floor in the hall below, soaked with last night's feasting remains, now releases a pungent perfume of sour ale, meat fat, and the unmistakable tang of human waste. Add to that the smoke from the still, smouldering hearth, and the dampness that creeps into everything, and you find yourself inhaling the medieval equivalent of an unholy cocktail. Your fellow sleepers rise one by one, stretching, yawning. Scratching in ways that remind you personal space is a modern luxury. The communal chamber is a mess of bodies and straw, the floor scattered with dropped crumbs and gnawed bones from those who ate where they lay. Someone sneezes loudly, the kind of sneeze that makes you pray germs weren't invented until the 19th century. Another person coughs, deep and wet, and you're instantly aware of how closely packed everyone is. Congratulations, you're now living inside the world's least appealing sleepover. The morning ritual begins. Servants rush about, lighting fresh torches, fetching buckets of water, and muttering prayers as they pass. The higher-ranking residents, minor nobles, knights, or guests, demand washing basins. Of course, washing here means splashing a handful of cold water onto the face and calling it a day. Soap is rare, scented oils rarer still, and deodorant is a dream for future generations. You're tempted to join in the ritual, but the nearest basin looks suspiciously murky, as though several people have already introduced their morning grime to it. You decide your face can wait. The great hall is already alive. You shuffle back downstairs, careful not to slip on the uneven steps, and are greeted by a sight that makes you reconsider your decision to get out of bed in the first place. Breakfast is being served, or rather, thrown together. There's no spread of fresh pastries and hot coffee here. Instead, trenchers of stale bread, a few hunks of cheese, and a pot of weak ale are plopped onto the tables. People grab what they can, tearing the bread with their teeth, dunking it into the ale to soften it, and swallowing with the desperation of those who know there won't be more until midday. The smell of yesterday's feast lingers, mingled with the smoke that still hasn't cleared. Dogs roam freely, snapping up scraps, while a servant sweeps the floor with what looks more like a bundle of sticks than an actual broom. Children dart about, barefoot and sticky-faced, shouting in the echoing hall until someone smacks them into silence. You edge toward the food, stomach growling. The bread is hard, so hard you could probably use it as a defensive weapon in case last night's brawlers return. You dunk it into the owl, which tastes sour, yeasty, and disturbingly warm, then take a cautious bite. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't even taste okay. But it's calories, and you're beginning to realize calories are the only currency that matters here. Around you, conversation flows in a jumble of dialects. Men argue about land disputes, women gossip about who might be sneaking off with whom, and servants whisper about the lord of the castle. You can't follow every word, but the tone is clear. Everyone is tired, everyone is cranky, and everyone is already preparing for another long day of survival. Now, let's make a modern comparison for fun. Imagine your workplace had a mandatory team breakfast every morning. The coffee is replaced with warm beer, the bagels with rock-hard bread, and instead of casual chat about Netflix shows, everyone loudly discusses livestock, taxes, and who might be cursed by witchcraft. Would you survive the first week? Probably not. And yet, here, this is considered routine. The lord of the castle finally appears, striding into the hall with all the gravitas of a man who hasn't carried his own trenches in years. His clothes are finer, though not exactly comfortable, layers of wool, fur, and linen designed to impress more than to ease. He sits at the high table, a perch raised slightly above the others to remind everyone of the pecking order. His meal looks no better than yours, but it's presented with more ceremony, because appearances are everything. The moment he sits, the entire atmosphere shifts, voices drop, posture stiffens, and the casual roadiness of earlier is replaced by nervous quiet. Power, after all, isn't just about swords and soldiers. It's about being the man whose presence makes a hall full of tired, hungry people behave. The lord nods to his steward, and suddenly the day's orders begin. Servants scurry off to prepare for work in the kitchens and fields. Guards receive their assignments, some patrolling the walls, others training in the yard. The steward reads out complaints and disputes, while scribes scribble on parchment that probably cost more than most peasants will see in a lifetime. The castle, in short, begins to hum with the business of existing. You find yourself pushed along with the crowd, herded like livestock into the routines of the day. It doesn't matter that you're technically a time traveler with no assigned role. The castle doesn't care. Everyone has a place, and if you don't know yours, someone will decide for you. As you step out into the courtyard, the cold morning air slaps your face like an insult. The sky is grey, the ground muddy, and the smell here is even worse than inside. Horses stamp in the stables, chickens squawk, and a pig squeals as someone tries to drag it toward its fate. The air is thick with manure smoke, and the metallic tang of the blacksmith's forge. It's a carnival of unpleasant smells, and you're the unwilling guest of honor. And yet, despite the filth, the courtyard is alive. Soldiers practice with spears, their grunts echoing against the stone walls. A group of women carry buckets of water from the well, gossiping as they splash their skirts. Children chase each other in the mud, laughing in a way that almost makes you forget how bleak this place can be. Almost. You're about to take another cautious step when someone shouts. A guard points in your direction, barking something you don't understand. Panic flares. Have you been found out? Are you about to be dragged to the dungeons? The man strides toward you, armor clinking, face stern. He stops just short of grabbing your arm and jabs a finger toward the well. He shouts again, and this time you understand. You've just been volunteered for water, carrying duty. Lucky you. Time travel, it turns out, comes with chores. The guard doesn't wait for your response. He simply thrusts an empty wooden bucket into your hands, points at the well, and marches off. You're left standing there like a medieval intern, already regretting waking up this morning. The bucket is heavier than it looks, the handle rough against your palm. You shuffle toward the well, joining the line of peasants and servants who have clearly been at this longer than you. They balance 2 buckets each, slung from yokes across their shoulders, walking with a practiced rhythm that keeps the water from sloshing. You, meanwhile, have the grace of a tourist carrying their first pumpkin. When your turn comes, you lower the bucket into the dark shaft. The rope creaks, the bucket splashes, and you heave it back up, arms burning. The water is cold, shockingly so, and the bucket is suddenly far heavier than you expect. You stagger, nearly spilling the entire thing on your boots. The woman behind you laughs, not unkindly, but with the wary amusement of someone who's seen countless fools before you. She hoists her 2 full buckets with ease and strides off. You wobble after her, feeling like the weakest character in a medieval sitcom. Your task is simple: carry water from the well to the kitchen. Simple, but not easy. The path is muddy, uneven, and crowded. Children dart in your way, dogs bark at your ankles, and a soldier nearly knocks you flat as he struts past without so much as an apology. By the time you reach the kitchen door, water has sloshed onto your tunic, soaking through and making you smell like a damp sheep. You set the bucket down with a grunt, proud that at least you've managed this one small chore. Inside the kitchen, chaos reigns. Fires roar, spits turn, and servants shout over each other as they chop, stir, and drag sacks of grain across the floor. The heat is suffocating, the smoke eye-watering, and you instantly regret coming in. The cook, a formidable woman with arms like tree trunks, notices you blocking the doorway. She barks an order you don't understand, but the message is clear: move or be moved. You set down the bucket and retreat before she uses a ladle as a weapon. Back outside, the guard reappears, watching you like a hawk. He points back at the well. Of course, 1 bucket isn't enough. You are now part of the endless loop that fuels castle life: fetch, carry, repeat. After your 3rd trip, your arms ache. After the 5th, your back protests. By the 7th, you're convinced this is some kind of medieval hazing ritual. You stumble on the uneven stones, nearly spill again, and this time the guard's glare sharpens. You realize suddenly that mistakes aren't just embarrassing here, they can be punished. You've seen the whipping post in the courtyard, the scars in the wood where countless backs have been torn open. You know that disobedience, laziness, or even clumsiness can earn you lashes, and in this world, infection is more deadly than the whip itself. The thought sobers you instantly. You grip the bucket tighter, steady your step, and push forward. But the medieval workplace doesn't have HR. As the day drags on, the rhythm of castle life surrounds you. You see the blacksmith hammering at glowing metal, sparks flying in the dim light. You hear the clatter of hooves as a knight rides out through the gate, his armor shining like a mirror of your misery. You smell roasting meat from the kitchens, a cruel reminder that you'll probably only get another hunk of bread for your efforts. There is no privacy, no pause. Everywhere, people labor. Women spin wool, children chase geese, men haul firewood. You are just one more moving piece in the endless machine that keeps this fortress alive. And the machine doesn't care if you're tired. At one point, you pass the stables and catch sight of something strange. A boy, no older than 12, is mucking out stalls with a shovel nearly as tall as he is. He pauses, leans on the handle, and steals a gulp of water from a bucket meant for the horses. A guard spots him, storms over, and cuffs him hard across the head. The boy stumbles, nearly falls, but says nothing. He simply goes back to shoveling, eyes lowered. You realize that here, even a sip of the wrong water can earn you violence. By late afternoon, your body is screaming. Your shoulders ache, your hands are raw, and you can barely feel your legs. You stagger to the side of the courtyard, collapsing against the cold stone wall. No one notices. No one cares. Exhaustion, you learn, is invisible when everyone shares it. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows. Work doesn't end, but it changes rhythm. Guards swap shifts. The kitchen prepares for the evening meal. The smith quenches his last piece of iron. Slowly, the courtyard empties. You take the chance to wander, curiosity stronger than exhaustion. You find yourself drawn toward the edge of the yard, where a heavy wooden door sits half open. A chill draft wafts out, carrying a smell that makes your stomach knot: damp stone, mold, and something faintly metallic. You step closer, peering inside. A narrow stairwell descends into darkness. You know instantly what this is. The dungeons. A guard sits nearby, slouched on a stool, gnawing on a bone. He barely glances at you. Clearly, he doesn't expect anyone foolish enough to wander down there uninvited. But the door is open, and the darkness below is calling. You hesitate. You've seen the worst of the castle above. The stench, the filth, the labor. But what lies beneath? What kind of life exists in the bowels of this fortress, hidden from daylight? The thought chills you. You turn away, stumbling back toward the hall as the guard yawns. But the image lingers in your mind, the yawning stairwell, the darkness, the secrets that only the stones themselves know. That night, when the hall fills again with drunken voices, smoke, and the sour scent of humanity, you lie awake on your straw pallet. Your body aches, but your mind races. Life above ground is already almost unbearable. But something tells you that below, in the dungeons, survival is a different kind of nightmare. And tomorrow, you might just find yourself there. The door to the stairwell creaks open again. And this time you're not just peering in. You're being shoved. A guard, clearly tired of your useless wandering, mutters something about helping below, and pushes you toward the open moor of stone steps. The torchlight barely reaches down, and already the draft feels like a living thing, damp, icy, and carrying the faint stench of rotting straw. Your boots echo as you descend, each step hollow against the spiral of stone. The air grows thicker, wetter, and every breath carries a metallic tang that you recognize too well by now. Blood, or perhaps rust, maybe both. The sounds of the courtyard fade, until there's nothing but the scrape of your soles and the distant drip, drip, drip of unseen water. At the bottom, the dungeon yawns open. A narrow corridor stretches before you, lined with iron-barred doors. A single torch sputters on the wall, throwing more shadow than light, and behind those bars shapes shift. Some human, some not quite. The smell hits you hardest. Sour sweat, rotting food, unwashed flesh. The kind of odor that makes your stomach revolt. You press your sleeve to your nose, but it doesn't help. The guard behind you laughs at your gagging, then slams the door shut, leaving you locked in with the dungeon and its inhabitants. You walk slowly, trying to avoid drawing attention, but that's impossible here. Faces emerge from the darkness, hollow eyes, missing teeth, bruises blooming across pale skin. Fingers reach through the bars, clawing at the air as though your presence alone is something worth grabbing. A voice croaks, water. Another rasps, braid. A third only laughs, low and broken, the sound more chilling than the silence. You keep walking, heart hammering. The cells are small, barely large enough to lie down in. Some prisoners are chained to the wall, their ankles rubbed raw by iron cuffs. Others crouch in straw that hasn't been changed in months, maybe years. You see a rat dart between two cells, bold enough to steal crumbs right from a prisoner's lap. The man doesn't even react. Perhaps he's too weak. Or perhaps he knows that even a rat has more chance of survival than he does. And then there are the sounds. Groans, mutters, coughs that rattle deep in lungs. One prisoner whispers prayers under his breath, over and over like a mantra. Another bangs his head against the wall in slow rhythm. Somewhere down the corridor, someone screams. A high, piercing cry that cuts through your bones. It stops abruptly, replaced by heavy silence. You find yourself frozen, staring into the darkness, waiting for it to start again. When you finally move, your foot splashes into something wet. You don't want to know what it is. The floor is slick, uneven, and the moisture seeps through your boots, chilling your toes. The torchlight flickers, and for a moment you swear the shadows themselves shift, creeping closer, watching. A guard eventually appears from a side door, yawning. He eyes you with mild annoyance. You're the new one, eh? Good. You'll be carrying buckets. He gestures to a stack of wooden pails, each coated in grime. You don't ask what's inside them, because you already know. Waste. Human waste. The dungeon's version of plumbing. Your task is to carry them up, empty them, and bring them back. The stench is indescribable. The liquid sloshes with every step, threatening to spill on your boots. The prisoners watch you with hollow eyes as you pass, and you wonder if carrying filth is better than being behind the bars yourself. The answer isn't clear. After the third trip, your stomach finally revolts. You retch into a dark corner, clutching your knees, the sour taste burning your throat. A prisoner laughs hoarsely, the sound like gravel. First day. He croaks. You don't answer. But then, almost without warning, you find yourself drawn to one cell in particular. Inside sits an old man, his beard tangled, his robes filthy. Yet his eyes are startlingly clear, almost too clear for this place. He doesn't beg, doesn't reach, doesn't even move much. He just watches you with unsettling calm, as if he knows something you don't. When you pause, he speaks. You don't belong here. His voice is soft but certain, echoing in the silence. You swallow hard, unsure how to respond. Before you can, the guard calls your name, or rather, whatever he thinks your name is, and shoves another bucket into your hands. The old man fades back into shadow, but his words cling to you like damp air. You don't belong here. By the time the shift ends, you're drained. Every muscle aches, your clothes reek, and your spirit feels gnawed by the dark. You stagger back up the stairs, each step heavier than the last, until finally the door creaks open, and the cold night air of the courtyard rushes over you like freedom. But freedom is temporary. You know the dungeon waits below, and tomorrow you'll be sent back down. The thought haunts you as you return to the hall. You lie awake on your straw mat, the words of the old man echoing. You don't belong here. And yet, somehow you do. If you thought the dungeon was the worst this castle could offer, wait until you discover how justice is truly served here, in the form of public trials and punishments that make the dungeon seem merciful. The next morning, you're shaken awake before dawn. The guard doesn't bother explaining why. He simply jerks his thumb toward the courtyard and growls, "Up." You stumble into the crisp air, still heavy with mist, and realize that the castle is gathering. People crowd the yard. Peasants, servants, soldiers. Even the Lord's steward with his pompous little hat, perched like a crown. Something important is about to happen. At the center stands a raised platform of rough timber, flanked by a heavy post and a set of shackles. Beside it, a man in dark robes unfurls a scroll. His voice booms across the yard, declaring charges you can barely follow: theft, blasphemy, treason. Each word is punctuated with murmurs from the crowd. The first prisoner is dragged up. A young man, wrists bound, hair matted. His eyes dart wildly as the charges are read. You don't know if he's guilty. It hardly matters. His fate was sealed the moment the guards decided he was. The punishment is swift flogging. 2 men tie him to the post, bare his back, and lay into him with whips tipped in knots. The sound is wet, sharp, sickening. The crowd watches in silence, some grim, some entertained. You flinch at each strike, but no one else does. To them, this is routine. To you, it's unbearable. When the boy collapses, unconscious or dead, you can't tell. He's dragged away like a sack of grain. The next prisoner is brought forward. This one is accused of heresy. His punishment is more elaborate: the stocks. He's shoved into a wooden frame that locks his head and hands, forcing him to kneel awkwardly. The crowd is already stirring, gathering rotten vegetables, stones, anything throwable. Soon the man is pelted from every direction, jeers rising with each hit. Children laugh as he spits blood and curses. You stand frozen, horrified, but you can't look away. The cruelty isn't hidden in this world, it's entertainment. Punishment is meant to be seen, to be felt by the entire community. It's a warning this could be you. And then comes the third prisoner. When you see him, your heart stops. It's the old man from the dungeon. The one with the startlingly clear eyes. His beard has been combed, his rags replaced with a torn robe, but it's him. He walks calmly as though he expected this. The crowd murmurs louder this time. Clearly, this trial is important. The charges: witchcraft. The robed official reads them out with grave solemnity. They say he summoned storms, cursed crops, bewitched cattle. The evidence is laughable, but the crowd nods, some spitting at his feet. The guard who dragged you to the dungeon stands nearby, arms folded, looking satisfied. You feel a surge of helplessness. This man, who spoke to you like no one else had, who seemed more alive than the rats and shadows, is about to die. And worse, it's not death in secret. It's death as theatre. The sentence is read aloud: execution at dawn tomorrow. The method is not specified, but you already know. Burning, hanging, beheading. Any of them is final. The old man lifts his head, scans the crowd, and his eyes find yours. He doesn't plead, doesn't beg. He only smiles faintly, as though he knows something you don't. That smile unsettles you more than the whips and the jeers. The guards drag him back toward the dungeon, and the crowd disperses. People chatter casually, as though they've just left a market. Life resumes, the cruelty absorbed into the rhythm of the day. You linger in the courtyard long after, staring at the post, the stocks, the blood soaking into the dirt. The castle is not just stone and smoke. It's fear, woven into every life. Survival here isn't about food or warmth. It's about obedience. And you wonder how long you can last before you too become part of the spectacle. That night, you return to your straw pallet, but you can't sleep. The image of the old man's eyes haunts you. His words echo again. You don't belong here. Maybe he's right. But the castle doesn't care whether you belong or not. It swallows everyone eventually. And if you think the dungeon and punishments are grim, wait until you see how the castle treats the people who are supposed to be honored. The nobles themselves. Their feasts are not what you imagine. The great hall of the castle is alive tonight. You know this the moment you're jolted awake by the ringing of bells, the thud of drums, and the unmistakable sound of trumpets being blown by men who look as though they haven't had a proper lungful of fresh air in a decade. Someone yanks you to your feet, a fellow servant perhaps, and shoves a ragged tunic into your arms. You're told, with the urgency of a battlefield command, that the Lord is feasting and everyone is needed. You shuffle toward the hall, half expecting glittering chandeliers and shining silverware. That's what the stories promised, wasn't it? Castles filled with golden goblets and refined courtesies, ladies in silk gowns floating past men in polished armor. Instead, when you push open the heavy oak doors, you're nearly bowled over by a wave of heat, noise, and the unmistakable stench of roasted meat, sweat, and spilled ale. The room is enormous, its rafters vanishing into shadows where bats flutter lazily. Torches line the walls, smoke curling upward in choking spirals. Long wooden tables stretch the length of the hall, crammed with nobles in velvet robes and servants in rags alike. Plates, if you can call them that, are nothing more than slabs of stale bread, already soggy with grease. Dogs slink between the benches, snapping up bones tossed to the floor. At the far end sits the Lord himself, on a chair carved with lions and angels. Though his slouch posture and dripping chin make him look less regal, more overt farmhand. He tears into a leg of roasted boar, grease running down his beard, while a servant hovers nearby with a cloth he clearly has no intention of using. The noise is deafening. Men shout across the tables, women laugh too loudly, and the scrape of knives against trenchers is constant. Someone belches with the confidence of a man who knows no one will scold him, and someone else vomits quietly into a corner before returning to their bread as though nothing happened. Welcome to noble refinement. Your first task is to carry jugs of ale from the barrel to the tables. The jug is heavy, the crowd jostles, and you're tripped more than once by dogs underfoot. Nobles grab at your sleeve, barking orders as if you're invisible until their cup is empty. One man insists on more wine, then promptly spills half of it into his lap. He howls with laughter, soaking his velvet breeches, and demands another. You realize quickly that alcohol is not accompaniment here. It is the main course. And oh, the food. Boar, venison, swan, pie stuffed with who knows what. Platters arrive steaming, only to be torn apart by greasy fingers before the carving knife even touches them. Knives, by the way, are personal property. Nobles bring their own, often unwashed from previous meals. Forks, unheard of. Fingers do the work, leaving greasy smears on silk sleeves and dripping elbows. The smell is overwhelming. At first, it makes your stomach growl. The sizzling fat, the spiced sauces, the sweet pastries. But as the night wears on, it curdles into something nauseating, meat mixed with sweat, wine mixed with vomit, all underlined by the wet dog musk of hounds wrestling beneath the benches. You dodge through the chaos, juggling jogs, when you hear a shriek of laughter from the high table. A nobleman, red-faced and wobbling, has decided it's funny to fling bones at a servant girl. His aim is terrible, but his friends roar with approval. The girl bows her head, cheeks burning, and continues to clear the plates. You catch her eye for a moment, and she gives you a look that says, "This is normal. Don't stare too long, or it will be you next." A minstrel attempts to play in the corner, plucking at a lute with trembling hands, but his melody is drowned by the crowd. When he falters, someone throws a chicken leg at his head. He ducks, keeps playing. Everyone laughs. Entertainment in this hall is humiliation. Hours drag by. You lose track of how many times you've refilled cups, how many times you've dodged greasy hands reaching for you, as though you're part of the meal. The heat is stifling, the noise unbearable. Your back aches from bending, your arms tremble from carrying. Still, no one notices you except when their cup is empty. And then, amid the chaos, you witness something that truly makes your stomach flip. A nobleman, overweight, flushed, his robe straining at the seams, begins to choke. He gasps, face turning red, then purple. For a moment, panic grips the table. But no one leaps to help him. Instead, they pound his back with such force it looks more like punishment than aid. Finally, with a wheeze, the man coughs up a hunk of gristle onto the table. Everyone cheers, and then, without pause, he picks up his knife and dives back into the meat. You stand there stunned, realizing that in this world, even death at the dinner table isn't enough to interrupt the party. And if the nobles eat like kings, the servants eat like dogs. Quite literally. Off the scraps tossed to the floor. You're handed a gnawed bone at one point, pushed by another servant into a dark corner, where others crouch, chewing what little marrow is left. You hesitate, but hunger drives you. You bite, the grease coating your lips, and you understand in a visceral way that in this castle, dignity is a luxury no one can afford. As you wipe your mouth, you hear a horn blow outside, 3 short blasts, urgent and sharp. The hall quiets, just for a moment, then erupts into shouts. A messenger bursts in, mud spattering the floor, and drops to one knee before the Lord. His words carry clearly through the suddenly hushed crowd that the plague has reached the village. The hall goes silent. The smell of meat and wine hangs heavy, but the taste in your mouth is suddenly ash. You try to settle in, though settling here feels like an overstatement. The bed creaks as if it has seen not just centuries, but also far too many questionable encounters, some of which may have ended in violence, betrayal, or just indigestion from bad stew. The mattress sags toward the center. An unspoken medieval invitation for anyone unlucky enough to share the bed with you to roll into each other like 2 unfortunate dumplings in a poorly tied pot. The straw filling shifts beneath you, and with it, so do the faint scuttling sounds of whatever calls this place home. It dawns on you that the true lords of the castle are not the men in chainmail, but the bugs. The candlelight on the wall wavers, throwing shadows that seem far more threatening than comforting. At first glance, it's just the flicker of tallow flame, but stare long enough, and suddenly every shadow looks like a figure moving toward you, a dagger glinting at its side. Try to remind yourself, it's just a candle. Then again, that's exactly what someone would say in a ghost story, right before the thing in the corner takes a step forward. And there are sounds, always sounds. The groan of wood shifting in the rafters, the drip of water from somewhere unseen, echoing in ways that make you wonder how deep this fortress really goes. Outside the room, you catch the faint scrape of boots on stone, followed by a low laugh that doesn't seem particularly friendly. Castles never sleep. Guards trade shifts at odd hours, and prisoners in the dungeon cough or cry out like distant owls with very poor manners. You pull the wool blanket higher around your shoulders, trying to block the cold. It smells faintly of sheep, and very strongly of whoever used it before you, probably several someones. A hint of smoke clings to it, though you can't tell if that's from the fireplace, or from the fact that everyone in this castle seems to exist in a permanent cloud of burning torches, hearths, and boiled turnips. And then there's the chamber pot. It sits innocently in the corner, a ceramic sentinel of midnight desperation. You swear you can smell it even when it's empty, like it has absorbed centuries of indignities. At some point tonight, you know the silence will be broken by the unmistakable splash of someone in the corridor making use of theirs. That will be your lullaby echoing water, followed by a sigh of relief and perhaps a muttered curse. If Spotify existed, medieval chamber pot sounds would top the charts. Of course, you could pretend to be noble and ignore it all, convincing yourself that a medieval night is just rustic charm. But then the itch begins. First on your leg, then your shoulder. Was that your imagination? Or has one of the many enthusiastic bedmates, lice, fleas, or worse, decided you're tonight's feast? You scratch. It helps for about 2 seconds, and then the itch migrates like a determined pilgrim, settling somewhere else. By morning, if you survive morning, you'll be speckled like a medieval map with mysterious red spots. And should you manage to drift off, don't expect peace. Sleep is as restless as the walls are damp. Somewhere in the hall, a guard thumps by, armor clanking just enough to make you wake up half certain that war has broken out. From below, the faint sound of a dog barking rises, sharp and echoing. And occasionally, you'll hear voices that don't seem quite earthly. Maybe it's the stone itself, remembering everything it has witnessed. Castles were built for defense, but they're better at trapping whispers, echoes, and regrets. If you were imagining that a medieval castle night would be romantic, moonlight streaming through a window, gentle snores of loyal companions nearby, think again. It's a cold, creaking, crawling endurance test, interrupted by paranoia that the man with the torch outside your door isn't a friendly guard, but someone who's been waiting centuries for you to blink. And if you thought the bed was the worst part, wait until you see what morning brings. Because as foul as night in a castle can be, dawn has its own arsenal of horrors. Rising with the sun means more than birdsong and fresh air. Here, it means smells that can strip paint, breakfasts that might actually kill you, and the charming company of people who haven't discovered toothpaste yet. The rooster crows before the sun even peeks over the horizon, as if he has a personal vendetta against anyone who values sleep. His voice cuts through the damp air like a medieval alarm clock you can't snooze. You jolt awake on your straw mattress, confused, itchy, and mildly resentful of life itself. The rooster keeps going, relentless, until you wonder if strangling poultry was punishable by law. Spoiler, it was. And the punishment wasn't worth it. Your joints protest as you sit up. Every part of your body feels stiff, as though the stone floor beneath the bed seeped into your bones during the night. The air is colder now than it was at midnight, which seems unfair. Morning is supposed to be refreshing. Here, it feels like you've been locked in a meat cellar. Then it hits you. Not the rooster, but the smell. It drifts through the halls and under the door. A mix of wood smoke, damp stone, unwashed bodies, and something else askew. You'd think food would be welcome. But stew at dawn is not the cozy delight you're picturing. It's thick, murky, and smells faintly of boiled cabbage that lost the will to live sometime last week. Your stomach growls anyway, because what choice do you have? It's this or nothing, and nothing wasn't really an option for most medieval folk. The castle is stirring. Boots echo in the corridors. A guard shouts something in French. Or is it Latin? Either way, it sounds like the kind of yelling you don't want directed at you. Servants hurry past with buckets, their faces pale with exhaustion. A few carry rushes to scatter on the floors, because that's how you clean in this era. Cover yesterday's filth with today's greenery and pretend it's progress. Imagine spritzing Febreze on a landfill. As you shuffle to the narrow window, hoping for fresh air, you're greeted instead by the stench of the courtyard below. Horses stamping and snorting, manure steaming in the dawn light, and people relieving themselves against walls because chamber pots weren't always convenient. The smell rises like a thick morning fog, mixing with smoke from the kitchen fires until the whole scene feels like a medieval cologne called Audi Regret. You think longingly of modern mornings. Coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, toothpaste foaming. Here breakfast is a rough slab of bread so dense it could double as a weapon, dipped in oil that's flat but safer than the water. If you're lucky, you get cheese. If you're unlucky, you get the kind of cheese that bites back. And yes, this is all before the sun fully rises. Medieval life didn't wait for Starbucks to open. One of the servants passes with a wooden tray, offering what looks suspiciously like yesterday's stew reheated and called today's breakfast. You take a bite. It tastes exactly like despair feels, soggy, lukewarm, and faintly mysterious. You try not to think about what meat was used this time. Best not to ask questions when the cook smiles at you with too many missing teeth. Your stomach churns, but you eat anyway. Because in the castle, refusing food is worse than enduring it. Besides, if you don't eat now, you'll be gnawing on your sleeve by noon. Survival here isn't about satisfaction. It's about fuel, no matter how unpleasant the source. And just as you're beginning to accept this tragic new reality, you hear the church bell tolling, low, heavy, echoing through every stone passage. It means prayers. It means duties. It means your day in the castle is only just beginning. And if you thought the nights were bad, the daylight hours have their own ways of breaking you. The bell doesn't just ring, it shakes the walls, the floor, and your sanity. Each toll vibrates through the castle like a command: wake, pray, work, repeat. The sound bounces off the stone corridors until it feels like you're sitting inside the belly of some enormous bronze monster. Servants scurry toward the chapel, eyes half closed, clutching cloaks against the cold. You shuffle along too, because in a medieval castle, standing still is suspicious, and suspicion is rarely good for your health. The chapel is dim, filled with the smoke of tallow candles and incense that smells halfway between holy devotion and burnt socks. Everyone mumbles prayers in Latin, though most don't understand a word. You nod along, trying to look pious, but your knees ache from kneeling on the hard floor, and your stomach is still staging a quiet rebellion against that tragic stew. Faith may soothe the soul, but it doesn't soothe indigestion. By the time prayers end, the castle is fully awake, and so are you, though against your will. The great hall buzzes with activity. Servants sweep rushes across the floor, which is really just a polite way of spreading yesterday's mess into new, exciting patterns. The lord of the castle shouts orders from the high table, his voice carrying over the din of clattering pots, barking dogs, and someone already sharpening a sword, as if preparing for a duel at breakfast. You try to slip away for a quiet corner, but quiet corners don't exist here. Privacy is as mythical as dragons. Rooms are shared, doors are flimsy, and walls are so thin that every cough, every snore, every whispered gossip seeps through like water through a cracked jug. You're never alone in a medieval castle. Even your thoughts feel crowded. And then there are the chores. If you thought life behind stone walls meant lounging around like a character from a tapestry, think again. Buckets must be hauled, fires stoked, animals fed, floors scattered with fresh herbs to mask the smell of manure and sweat. Even nobles aren't exempt. They may not scrub pots, but they attend endless councils, hear disputes over sheep, and listen to minstrels who play the same 3 songs until you want to invent headphones centuries early. Everywhere you turn, there's noise. The clang of metal from the smithy, the chatter of maids, the clatter of dishes. Children run through the corridors shrieking with delight or terror. It's sometimes hard to tell which. Dogs snarl over scraps. Someone sneezes violently, the sound echoing as though the castle itself just caught the plague. The smell shifts with each room: smoke in the kitchens, damp hay in the stables, sour ale in the hall, mildew in the stairwells. You learn quickly that breathing through your mouth is the only strategy for survival. But then you taste the air, and that's somehow worse. And you're just trying to make it through the morning without offending someone important. Because in a castle, offense is deadly. Say the wrong thing to the cook, and you'll starve. Say the wrong thing to a knight, and you'll get flattened. Say the wrong thing to the lord, and, well, let's just say the dungeon isn't exactly spy-like. The day stretches out in front of you like a gauntlet. The noise, the stink, the endless eyes on you. It's enough to make you crave the misery of last night's cold bed again. At least then, your only enemies were the fleas. Now, you're contending with politics, chores, and the very real possibility that breakfast stew wasn't the worst thing you'll have to swallow today. And if you think the mornings are overwhelming, wait until you see what passes for entertainment inside these walls. Because when the sun is high and the chores are done, the castle has a way of amusing itself that might just amuse you too, if you can stomach it. The castle at midday is a different beast entirely. By night, it groans like an old man with too many secrets. By morning, it grumbles like a hangover in stone. But when the sun rises high and spills its pale light through the arrow slits, the place comes alive in a way that almost fools you into thinking you're safe. Almost. The great hall is where it begins. You step inside and immediately hear the buzz, a mixture of clanging dishes, laughter that sounds more like threats, and the occasional bark of a dog who seems to have more freedom than you. The tables, heavy and scarred from years of feasts and fights, are littered with trenchers. Flat rounds of stale bread that serve as plates, cutlery, and eventually, the compost heap for the pigs. Imagine eating your soup out of a sponge, then throwing the sponge to the dog. That's lunch. The lord of the castle sits at the high table, back straight, one hand resting on a goblet of wine that looks suspiciously like breakfast leftovers. His eyes sweep the room, not so much benevolent as calculating. Every glance he gives is a ledger line, ally, enemy, liability, pawn. You shuffle into a corner and try not to look like any of those things, which is harder than it sounds. Entertainment begins not with music, but with argument. A knight, red-faced and sweaty from morning drills, slams his fist on the table, demanding justice for some slight involving a pig, a fence, and a neighbor's daughter. The steward rolls his eyes like this is the 15th pig daughter fence dispute of the week. The argument escalates until someone suggests trial by combat, and suddenly, the entire hall perks up, as if someone just announced free beer. You don't realize until now that the castle's version of Netflix is live violence. A fight in the courtyard is better than any feast. You're dragged outside with the rest of the crowd, pressed shoulder to shoulder with peasants, servants, and even ladies in fine dresses who look disturbingly excited about the prospect of bloodshed. Two men circle each other in the dirt, swords gleaming, their breaths clouding in the crisp air. When steel clashes, the crowd gasps in unison, and you feel it in your chest like the bass drop at a concert. Only this concert ends with someone's cousin bleeding on the ground. It's not all duels and drama, though. The castle also entertains itself with hunting parties, falconry, and minstrels who sing songs so long you wonder if they're secretly being paid by the hour. You find yourself in the courtyard as a falconer releases his bird, its wings slicing through the air with effortless grace. The bird swoops, catches a rabbit, and returns, dropping its prize at the Lord's feet. Everyone claps politely, but you notice the rabbit hasn't quite stopped twitching yet. Applause for murder. It's a theme here. And if you think that's bad, just wait until the jester arrives. He's dressed in motley, bells jingling as he tumbles into the hall with exaggerated pratfalls. His jokes are coarse, full of innuendo, and aimed mostly at whoever can't hit him back without looking like they lack a sense of humor. He juggles knives for laughs, and the knives are not blunt. One slips, lance point first in the table, and everyone roars with laughter as though near-death experiences are the peak of comedy. You chuckle nervously, hoping you're not next in line for the punchline. All the while the smells cling to you. Roasting meat from the kitchens, tangy and promising, mingles with sweat from the training yard, horse dung from the stables, and the sharp tang of unwashed wool cloaks. You breathe shallowly, because the longer you inhale, the more your stomach churns. Still, compared to the stew at breakfast, it's practically perfume. It's easy to forget, in the noise and bustle, that danger lurks in every corner. A smile from a nobler woman might mean an invitation to dance. Or it might mean you've just been marked for gossip that could ruin you. A pat on the shoulder from a knight might be camaraderie. Or a warning. You're never sure which, and the not knowing is worse than the certainty. Yet there are moments of bizarre beauty. The sunlight slanting across the tapestries makes them glow, turning stiff scenes of hunting and heraldry into something almost alive. The falcons wheel overhead, their shadows gliding across the courtyard like winged ghosts. Even the clash of steel during training drills has a rhythm, a metallic heartbeat that thrums through the air. But every time you start to admire it, something snaps you back. A servant trips, spilling ale on a knight's boots, and suddenly the hall is filled with shouts, threats, and a goblet hurled across the room. The servant trembles, mutters apologies, and you realize just how fragile life is here. One wrong move, one spilled drink, and your entire future could end in the dungeon. You wander to the kitchens, hoping for quiet, but instead find chaos turned up to 11. Cooks bark orders, fires roar, pots clang. A pig's head stares at you from a wooden board, eyes glazed, apple shoved in its mouth as if mocking your discomfort. The cook notices you, waves a greasy hand, and offers you a taste of something unidentifiable. You decline politely, already haunted by the breakfast stew. The truth is, there's no real rest in a castle at noon. Leisure here looks suspiciously like danger wrapped in entertainment. You can laugh at a jester, cheer at a duel, or admire a falcon. But underneath it all is the knowledge that these walls were built not for comfort, but for survival. And survival, as you're discovering, has no intermission. And if you think the day is long now, wait until night falls again. Because castles, as you'll soon learn, are places where shadows grow teeth. The afternoon drags on like a tournament that nobody asked for. Just when you think the day can't cram in more noise, Someone beats a drum in the courtyard. A real drum, skin stretched taut, thudding with a rhythm that makes your teeth rattle. Men gather with shields and spears, practicing their formations. You're swept into the crowd again, shoulder to shoulder, pressed against armor that smells of iron and stale sweat. At first, it seems like harmless drill. A sergeant barking orders, men shuffling into lines. But then the rhythm changes. The clash of wood against wood fills the air as they lunge, block, retreat, advance. Shields slam, spears jab, and suddenly you're no longer watching a practice. You're watching rehearsal for survival. They train not for fun, but for the very real possibility that raiders, rebels or rivals could appear on the horizon tomorrow, or even today. You feel it then, the purpose of the castle. Every stone underfoot, every drafty corridor, every miserable night, it all exists for this. Not comfort, not community, defense. Everybody within these walls is both resource and liability. And as you stand there, heart pounding with the rhythm of the drums, you realize you are neither soldier nor lord. You are extra weight. In a siege, you'd be a burden. In a raid, you'd be cannon fodder. The realization creeps in like the coldie, you don't belong here, and this place knows it. A trumpet blares, shrill enough to make you wince. It signals the end of drill, and just like that, the mood shifts. Laughter breaks out among the men, rough and raucous, a release of tension. They slap each other's backs, guzzle all straight from skins, and collapse on the ground as if their lives don't depend on doing the same thing tomorrow. It's unnerving, this whiplash between deathly seriousness and reckless joy. Medieval people seem to live on the edge of catastrophe, and maybe that's why their laughter always sounds like it's teetering on the brink of madness. Later, as the shadows lengthen, you find yourself in the solar, a slightly warmer chamber where the Lord and his family retreat. Here, tapestries soften the walls, and the light from stained glass filters in like shards of colored fire. For a moment, it feels almost civilized. Women sew by the window, their needles flashing. Children play on the floor with carved wooden figures. A clerk reads aloud from a manuscript, his voice steady and droning. But don't be fooled. The civility here is fragile, the smiles thin. One misplaced word could shift the entire mood. Gossip simmers beneath every polite exchange. Who's marrying whom? Who owes money? Who insulted whose cousin at last week's feast? You try to blend into the furniture, but the Lord's gaze finds you anyway, as sharp as a falcon's. It lingers just long enough to remind you that guests are always being weighed, measured, judged. The hours stretch. Entertainment becomes endurance. A minstrel strums a lute, singing verses about heroes long dead and victories half forgotten. The melody drones like a lullaby, but the lyrics are all blood, fire, and vengeance. You catch yourself nodding off, only to jolt awake at the wrong moment, drawing a suspicious glance. You clap along too late, your palms smacking the air with the subtlety of a modern tourist in a medieval cosplay fair. Smooth. And then, because apparently boredom is as deadly as hunger, the Lord announces a hunt for the next day. The hall cheers. You don't. The thought of galloping through the forest on horseback, chasing terrified animals with pointy weapons, isn't exactly your idea of leisure. But here, refusing is not an option. If the Lord rides out, so do you, whether you like it or not. By late afternoon, the castle quiets slightly, though quiet. Here still means the occasional clang of metal or shout from the kitchens. You slip outside into the bailey, hoping for fresh air, but instead you're hit with a cocktail of manure, smoke, and boiled leather. Horses whicker in their stalls, chickens scuttle underfoot, and a pig snorts loudly as if mocking your discomfort. The stench clings to your clothes, your hair, your soul. If you ever make it back home, you'll carry this smell forever, like a cursed souvenir. Still, as the sun dips toward the horizon, the castle takes on an eerie beauty. The stone glows amber in the fading light, banners flutter in the breeze, and the sky turns the color of bruised peaches. For a fleeting moment, you almost forget the fleas, the stew, the endless noise. You almost believe in the romance of castles. Almost. Then the bell tolls again, deep, resonant, dragging you back into the reality that another night is coming. And with night, the shadows. With shadows, the whispers. You shiver, because if the day is dangerous, the night is worse. Always worse. And if you thought today's entertainments were unsettling, wait until the darkness falls, and the castle reveals what it keeps hidden after sundown. The bell has tolled, and with it the mood of the castle changes. Daylight was noisy, crowded, suffocating. But night is something else. It isn't silence. Not really. It's tension stretched thin across the stone walls, a hush that isn't restful but charged, like the pause before a storm breaks. The corridors grow colder first. You notice it in your breath, small clouds blooming in the dim air. Torches sputter in their sconces, dripping resin and smoke that stains the stone with long black scars. The flicker of their flames plays tricks on the walls. Shadows lurch and twitch, moving like figures that aren't there. You blink, look again, and the shadows are gone. But your heart doesn't slow. The castle gate creaks shut with a groan like the bowels of the earth. The heavy bar slams into place, sealing you in. The sound reverberates through the walls, a reminder that these stones are a prison as much as a fortress. There's no leaving now. The night belongs to the castle, and you are part of its collection. Dinner begins again in the hall, though this time it's less raucous than at midday. Candles and oil lamps sputter on long trestle tables, their flames reflected in goblets of wine and grease, slick trenchers. The air is heavy, a mix of roasted meat, spilled ale, and the faint musk of bodies already unwashed from the day. You sit among them, trying not to gag as another haunch of pork is carved, fat dripping into the fire below. Conversation is lower now, more private. Daylight arguments give way to whispers, to confessions half drowned by the clatter of knives. You catch fragments. Rumors of a neighbor's betrayal, the threat of famine. A woman accused of witchcraft in a nearby village. Everyone talks in the half, light as though the shadows themselves are listening, ready to carry words to the wrong ears. The Lord presides at the high table, his face lit from below by a silver candlestick, making his eyes look cavernous, his mouth a grim line. He doesn't laugh as much now. He drinks steadily, a deliberate pace, as if fortifying himself for the long hours ahead. His lady sits beside him, expressionless, her veil hiding all but her pale cheeks and restless hands. You wonder what thoughts are locked behind her silence. Entertainment returns, but it feels sharper now. The minstrel sings darker ballads, songs of ghosts wandering moors, of warriors betrayed, of women drowned in rivers by jealous husbands. The room grows still as the verses unfold, every candle seeming to gutter in unison. For a moment, you think, these people believe this. To them, spirits are not metaphors. They're neighbors. And when the last note dies, the silence is heavy with superstition. Once the feast ends, the hall doesn't empty, it thins. Nobles drift to their chambers, servants clear plates, dogs prowl for scraps. You're left on the margins, not high-born enough to claim a bed in the solar, not low-born enough to be ignored entirely. A strange limbo. One of the squires gestures toward the upper stairs, and you realize you're expected to sleep in the great chamber with others of your rank. You climb the narrow spiral staircase, the steps uneven and worn from centuries of feet. The walls sweat with damp. The air smells of stone dust and old ash. You can hear everything, your own breath, the thump of your boots, the distant creak of doors. Above you, a slit window shows the last smear of twilight, fading to black. The chamber itself is worse than you imagined. A long, drafty room with straw mattresses scattered across the floor. The straw stinks of mildew and vermin. The blankets are rough wool, heavy with grease and the memory of countless bodies before yours. Fleas leap when you touch them, vanishing into the shadows. You sit, hesitant, and already feel crawling on your skin. But it's not the discomfort that unsettles you. It's the sound. The room is alive with noise, men snoring, coughing, shifting in their sleep, rats skittering along the beams, the faint drip of water through cracks in the stone. And beneath it all, a deeper rhythm. The heartbeat of the castle itself. The groan of timbers, the sigh of mortar settling, the whisper of wind through arrow slits. It's as though the building is breathing. You lie down, trying to will yourself to sleep, but rest is impossible. Every sound is amplified, every flicker of shadow a potential threat. And then there are the stories you overheard at dinner. Spirits, witches, curses. You laugh at yourself, quietly, nervously, but the laugh dies when you hear it. A cry, faint, distant, echoing through the stones. Not animal, not wind, human. You sit up, heart pounding, straining to hear. The others don't stir. Either they're deaf to it, or they've trained themselves not to react. You lie back down, trembling, but the sound comes again, a thin wail like a child. You think of the dungeons, the oubliettes, the stories of prisoners left to rot below, voices rising through the cracks at night. You press the blanket over your ears, but the castle doesn't let you escape. The sound lingers in your bones. At some point, exhaustion wins. You drift into uneasy sleep, dreams tangled with torchlight and shadow, screams and laughter echoing through corridors that twist into endless spirals. When you wake, it's not to sunlight but to firelight. A torch burns in the hall, a figure moves, silent, cloaked, passing down the corridor with deliberate slowness. You freeze, barely daring to breathe. The figure pauses outside the chamber, and for a heartbeat you're certain it's staring directly at you. Then it moves on, footsteps fading. You wait, counting your pulse, and only when the sound is gone do you let yourself exhale. No one else wakes. Were you the only one to see it? Or is everyone pretending, the way they ignored the cries? You curl tighter on the mattress, eyes wide open, until the first grey light of dawn seeps through the slit windows. The new day feels thin, unreal, as though the night has stolen part of you. You survived, technically. But you understand now what survival means in a medieval castle, not just enduring hunger or hardship, but facing the dark itself. The kind of dark that creeps inside you, that leaves marks no sun can erase. You rise, stiff and hollow-eyed, and follow the others down the stairs toward the hall. The bell rings again, a new day beginning. And you realize the night never truly ends here. It just changes shape. The morning bells have barely rung when you hear it, the grinding of iron hinges, deep and guttural, somewhere below the castle's belly. Few pay it any mind. To them, it is the sound of routine, as common as roosters crowing in the yard. But to you, it is the prelude to something you cannot ignore. The air itself seems to change as you move downward, away from sunlight and chatter. The stairways grow narrower, the ceilings lower. The scents shift too, less of bread baking and more of damp stone, old straw. And something coppery you don't want to name aloud. The warmth of the upper hall vanishes. Each step sinks you deeper into a chill that feels deliberate, like the cold is part of the architecture. At the bottom of the stair, the light dwindles. You trail a hand against the wall, your fingers brushing over centuries of grooves and scratches, as if the stone itself holds a record of every hand that clawed at it in desperation. The torch sputters, as though reluctant to reveal what waits ahead. The dungeon is not a single chamber, but a labyrinth. Thick iron bars cross heavy doorways, their edges gnawed with rust, but still impenetrable. Chains hang from hooks, clinking faintly whenever you pass. Some are so small you imagine wrists, no larger than a child's, locked into them. Others are brutal, meant for ankles or necks. The imagination doesn't need much effort here. It supplies screams even when the air is still. You pause by one cell, peering into the gloom. A bundle of rags stirs. Not rags, flesh. A man crouches in the corner, his hair a filthy mat, his eyes reflecting the faint light like an animal's. He doesn't speak, just stares unblinking. You want to ask him something. Who he is, what crime brought him here. But your throat closes. His silence is louder than words. Moving on, you hear dripping water. A steady rhythm, too slow to measure time, too mocking to ignore. It drips from the ceiling, staining the floor with dark patches. You wonder how long a man could sit chained here, with nothing but that sound to remind him he's alive. You suspect the answer is long enough to wish otherwise. And then you come to the oubliette. It's nothing more than a round hole in the stone floor, rim dark with mold, iron grate bolted across. But when you kneel and peer into it, your stomach lurches. A shaft plunges straight down into blackness, no steps, no ladder, no hope. You drop a pebble. It takes far too long to strike bottom. You don't hear it land on stone. You hear it land on something soft. That is when it hits you. Oubliette comes from the French oublier, to forget. This pit isn't for keeping prisoners. It's for erasing them. A man dropped down there might live a day, a week, maybe two, depending on what scraps of water drip through the cracks. But eventually, he becomes just another thing in the pile at the bottom, and the castle forgets he was ever here. You recoil, throat dry, but there's no time to dwell. A guard passes by, torch in hand, face shadowed by his helmet. He glances at you without speaking, then disappears into the passage ahead. You follow, hesitant, Until you come upon a chamber larger than the rest. This one is different. Not a cell. An execution space. The walls are blackened with soot. Chains dangle from the ceiling, some ending in hooks, others in clamps. The air stinks of burnt fat and iron. On the floor you notice grooves cut into the stone, channels that funnel toward a central drain. The torchlight gleams on its dark, sticky edges. You try not to think of what ran down those grooves, but your body knows. The faint metallic tang in the air confirms it. You imagine a prisoner dragged here from the cells. The dread in their eyes as they realized this was not a place for judgment, but for demonstration. Medieval justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about reminding the living what power looked like. And oh, the methods. The rack, stretching limbs until sockets tore. The strapodo, suspending a body by its wrists until shoulders cracked. The Iron Maiden, perhaps myth more than truth. But the stories linger anyway, sharp and terrible. Even the simpler torments. The whip, the stocks, the branding iron, become monstrous when performed in flickering light before an audience thirsty for fear. You step closer to the wall and notice scratches carved into the stone. Not decorative, desperate. Jagged words in Latin and Old French prayers, curses, names. A man trying to tell the world he existed, knowing the world would ignore him. You run your hand over the letters, rough against your palm, and wonder if the scribe survived long enough to finish the last line. The dungeon is not just a place of confinement. It is theatre. Upstairs, lords and ladies debate, feast, make alliances. Down here, power is written in bruises and scars, in screams that echo through the cracks at night. You understand now why the servants ignored the wails you heard before. They weren't ghost stories. They were Tuesday. And yet, you realize something else. These walls have seen more than punishment. They've seen betrayal, intrigue, secrets whispered through the bars, coins slipped to guards, lovers meeting in forbidden shadows. For all its horror, the dungeon is also a stage for human desperation. And desperation, makes people dangerous. As you climb back toward the stair, your chest feels tight, your throat raw. The sunlight waiting above feels impossible, almost obscene, like laughter at a funeral. But that's the castle's trick. It swallows agony in its depths and dresses joy on its surface, expecting no one to connect the two. When you emerge into daylight, blinking, the courtyard bustles with life again. Children chase dogs, women hang linens, a blacksmith hammers at his forge. No one spares a thought for what you just saw. The castle keeps its nightmares underground, and everyone is complicit in pretending they don't exist. You try to shake it off, but even the warmth of the sun can't melt the chill clinging to your bones. You realize the truth. Surviving a medieval castle isn't about enduring its luxuries, or even its wars. It's about carrying the weight of its silence. To live here is to know what happens beneath your feet, and to look away anyway. And if you think the dungeon was the worst the castle could throw at you, if you think chains and oubliettes are the ultimate test, wait until you see what waits above, in chambers reserved not for prisoners, but for royalty. Power has its own poisons, and some are deadlier than chains. The higher you climb in the castle, the colder it gets, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Down in the dungeons, fear wore its face openly, painted in blood and soot. Up here, in the royal chambers, it wears velvet. The stones are draped in tapestries, the air perfumed with incense. The floors scattered with rushes that have been changed more recently than the ones in the great hall. But beneath all that finery, you can feel the same tension humming, sharp and invisible, like a blade behind your back. The lord's apartments are not merely a bedroom. They are a theatre of authority. Every piece of furniture screams status: the heavy canopy bed, carved with saints, the chest bound with iron, the silver basin catching the light from narrow windows. Servants move silently in and out, carrying linens, food, or messages, their eyes cast down but their ears wide open. Nothing here is private, no matter how thick the curtains look. The air itself is different. Instead of the smoke and sweat of the lower halls, you smell rose oil, cloves, and lavender. But it isn't pleasant for long, because those perfumes are more than luxury. They're weapons. The stench of sickness is thick in medieval castles, and here, where heirs and power depend on fragile bodies, the scent of death is masked beneath herbs. You realize the irony the more a room smells of roses, the closer its occupants might be to rotting. You sit at the edge of the chamber, trying to look small, while a physician hovers over the Lord's youngest child. The boy is pale, sweat gleaming on his brow, his small body shivering despite the heavy blankets piled atop him. The physician mutters in Latin, prescribes bleeding to balance humors, and calls for a charm to be tied around the boy's wrist. His mother whispers prayers, clutching a rosary so tightly the beads leave marks in her hand. This is survival in the castle's heights, not chains, not oubliettes, but the constant looming of disease. Smallpox, measles, plague, none spare the rich. For every hair born in these chambers, another is lost, carried out silently through side doors before dawn. The castle knows how to grieve quietly, efficiently. But sickness is only one danger here. Poison is another. Not the dramatic vial of green liquid from Tales, but subtler methods: a powder mixed into wine, a paste spread beneath cheese, a tincture that leaves its victim writhing in fever for days before succumbing. At table, the Lord's cupbearer tastes first. But what if the cupbearer has been bought? What if the poison is slow, building over months? Trust is rarer than gold in these chambers. You notice it at supper that evening. The Lord takes his wine only after staring long into the goblet. His lady eats little, nibbling bread while her eyes dart from servant to servant. The tension sits heavy on every plate. Conversation is clipped, rehearsed, as though each word is weighed before release. You almost long for the open cruelty of the dungeon. At least down there you knew who your enemy was. And then there is the other poison: ambition. In these chambers, siblings plot against siblings, wives against husbands, uncles against nephews. A rumor whispered in the wrong ear can topple a future. The Lord's smile may look warm as he welcomes his brother to the table, but his hand never strays far from the knife. The tapestries tell stories of saints and knights, but the air tells a truer story, one of secrets and suspicion. You feel it in every glance, every pause between words, every servant who leaves the room just a little too slowly, ears open, eyes sharp. The dungeon chains bodies. These chambers chain minds. As you prepare to leave, slipping back down the spiral stairs, you catch sight of the royal bed again. Its curtains hang heavy, red as blood embroidered with golden lions. From a distance it looks majestic, a throne of sleep. But you know better now. It is not a refuge. It is a stage, a battlefield, a coffin waiting to be filled. And if you think this chamber is suffocating, wait until you step outside the castle walls. Because out there, beyond the drawbridge, survival is even crueler, and the enemy isn't just ambition, it's hunger. The drawbridge creaks open, chains clanking like the toll of some vast clock, and suddenly the air changes. Inside, the castle was heavy with smoke, incense, and secrets. Outside, the air tastes of damp earth, wood smoke, and manure. Not fresher exactly, just different. Honest in its own foul way, you cross the bridge, boots thudding on the timbers, and find yourself staring at a world the castle depends on, but rarely acknowledges. The village sprawls like an afterthought. A scatter of thatched huts leaning against one another, as though afraid of falling, smoke curling from holes in their roofs. Chickens darting through mud thick enough to swallow your shoes. Children shriek as they chase each other barefoot, their laughter as piercing as crows. The villagers look up when you pass, not with awe. Those days are gone. Their glances are quick, wary. To them, the castle is not a miracle of stone, but a hungry mouth that never stops asking for grain, labor, and taxes. And yet they survive here, in its long shadow, scraping life from earth that resists at every turn. A woman squats outside her hut, grinding barley in a stone quern. The sound is rhythmic, endless, like a heartbeat. Her hands are cracked, her back bent, but her eyes flicker with curiosity as she watches you. Inside the hut, a baby wails. Another child tugs at her skirt, face smeared with ash and snot. She doesn't pause. Work doesn't pause. The smell of the village is overwhelming: smoke, manure, sweat, and fish. Always fish. Hung to dry on wooden racks, salted in barrels boiled into thin stews. You pass a cart laden with herring, bound for the castle kitchens. The driver spits into the mud and glares at the walls above, muttering about how the lords will eat fresh, while his children gnaw on bones. If you thought fleas in the castle straw were bad, here they are an empire. Lice nest in hair, fleas hop freely across skin, and bedbugs are as common as dreams. People scratch openly, without shame. Their huts are warm only because they share them with animals. Pigs, goats, and chickens roost alongside their owners. The line between human and beast blurs when survival is the only priority. And yet, there's resilience here. A blacksmith hammers at his forge, sparks flying into the grey morning. A miller tends the water wheel, its groan echoing down the stream. A group of women gather at the well, gossiping as they haul buckets. Their laughter cuts the air, brief but bright. You realize the villagers have mastered an art the castle folk never could, living without illusions. But life here is precarious. Crops fail, and hunger gnaws through winter like a wolf. Disease spreads fast, unchecked by doctors or charms. A single spark can reduce a row of huts to ash. And looming always is the castle itself, ready to demand grain, conscripts, or worse. The lord's feasts are bought with their fasting. His wars are fought with their sons. A peasant boy tugs your sleeve and offers you a turnip. His face is hollow-eyed, his smile hesitant. When you bite it, muddy, bitter raw. He grins as though he's shared a treasure. You understand? Generosity here isn't measured in gold but in roots pulled from unforgiving soil. As evening falls, the village gathers. A fiddler scrapes out a tune by the fire, and children dance, their bare feet slapping the dirt. The air smells of wood smoke and thin stew, but for a moment, it feels like celebration. Survival itself is worth celebrating. You feel the warmth of it, the stubborn joy that insists on flickering even when the wind howls. But as you glance back, the castle looms on its hill, torches glinting in its arrow slits. Its shadow stretches across the village like a hand, reminding you that these moments of laughter are fragile. Tomorrow the Lord might call for higher taxes, or raiders might sweep through, or plague might take half the huts. The villagers live knowing this, and still they dance. You stand between two worlds now. Inside the castle ambition, poison, chains. Outside hunger, cold mud. Both are brutal. Both demand sacrifices you're not sure you can make. And you realize with a strange clarity that the question was never whether you could survive a single night in a medieval castle. The real question is, could you survive the life orbiting it, above or below, year after year?